Hi everybody. We've talked a lot on this channel about how to be concise in our writing. Why do we care so much about being concise? Because that is kind and helpful to our readers. Our readers are busy people just like ourselves, so it helps everybody when we write in a concise way. However, I got an excellent question in a workshop the other day by a participant who said, I do want to be concise, but is it possible to be too concise? Is it possible to be too direct, too clear, too specific? And we talked about it as a class and we decided that yes, it is. It is possible to be too concise because we could be so concise as to potentially sound overly direct, a little harsh, maybe a little bit aggressive. On the other hand, we know we don't want to be wordy or indirect. So we're left with this question of how can I balance how concise I am with how nice I am? Can I be concise and nice at once? Well, the answer, of course, is yes. We just have to use some purposeful strategies. So let's talk today about how to write in a way that's concise, yet also nice. Before we get into our 3 strategies for today, let's look at a quick example. And I like to think about a spectrum from incredibly 100% direct to 100% wordy. And where do we want to land on that spectrum? Might depend on the situation like everything else, right? Let's imagine a situation where we're asking somebody for feedback. Overly direct might be if I receive an email that says, Erin, comma, give me your feedback by Thursday, period. Regards, so-and-so. I might think, well, I think I know what to do. It was clear and concise, but I don't really feel super excited about giving my feedback because it seemed kind of bossy. And so on a writing EQ level, maybe that clear, concise message just isn't going to land right for the reader. On the other end of the spectrum, though, what if we thought, well, I don't want to be too bossy, so I'll say, greetings, Erin. I hope your week has been going great. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the survey whenever you have a moment. With appreciation, so-and-so. Now I'm kind of trying to up that writing EQ, but maybe I've gone too far and maybe I've gotten back into the territory of wordiness. Even more dangerous, I haven't really said when I need this information by. So it's possible to get so polite and so indirect that we haven't even clarified what we need. So we know we need to be able to balance these two. So let's talk about 3 ways we can purposefully manage how concise and how nice we're being in the same piece of writing. Strategy number 1, start with who and what, like we always do when we want to be concise. And remember, in the How to Write Concisely video, we talked about the fact that a sentence that begins with who and what is always the most concise way to write. So when concision is your goal, that's a good place to start. We're going to start with who and what in the beginning, but we're also trying to be nice. So we're going to be intentional about who is in the who spot, giving the attention and the highlight to the right person for a relational goal, for an emotional goal of who do we care about, who do we want to be seen as the most important in that sentence. And then when we choose our what, we're going to choose a verb that creates the right tone. So we know we're going to end up being concise and nice because we have a concise sentence structure, yet a thoughtful and purposeful word choice for who and what. Here's an example. I worked last week with a bunch of people at a credit union, very fun class, and we talked about an example of binders in different branches telling employees what to do, how to do different processes in order to have all the branches be consistent. Here is a non-concise way to write a sentence about that. There is a binder in each branch that lists the duties associated with opening and closing the lobby each day and should be followed. That example comes in at a robust 24 words. Side tip, if you ever run out of breath reading one of your sentences aloud, that is the sentence to edit. You saw me run out of breath towards the end there, and there weren't even any commas to give me that natural pause. We know that sentence isn't very concise, and in that way it's not very nice either, because the truth is, it is nice to be concise, right? We want to save people time. We just want to be careful about how we do it. 24 words is not really concise or helpful. How about starting with who and what? So maybe I could assume the branch binder is the who. That's what we seem to be talking about. I'll put that in my who spot and see what happens. The branch binder explains opening and closing duties. I cut my words down. I'm down to a third of the words I originally had, really just by starting with who and what. So remember, that will always make your sentence more concise. However, we also want to layer in tone, emotional connection, things like that. So that's when we leverage, well, who's going to be my who and what's going to be my what? I might think, making the sentence about a binder doesn't sound really relational. Maybe I want to make the sentence about people. And I could say, our team follows a specific opening and closing procedure. And then I can tell them about the binder later. But maybe the team is who I want to be the who, to show that sense of belonging. Or maybe I think the employee might be nervous. I could say, your manager can go through the binder with you. I'll walk you through the steps, right? Or maybe I want the focus to be on the employee themselves who's going to be doing this. You can get help opening and closing through the binder. So I can shift who's the who, and I know I'm already concise because I have a concise sentence structure, but then when I put somebody purposeful in the who, I get to give them attention and create a sense of collaboration if I use our team and things like that. We also, of course, want to be intentional about our verb, which is the what. So if I'm going to say something like, your supervisor can provide you with assistance, it sounds a little formal. I might want to say, your supervisor can help you, or something like that. So remember, the verb is where you're going to set the tone. So start with that concise sentence structure and then bring in a verb that creates the tone that you want, a relational tone. Okay, second idea. When you want to be concise, but you also want to extend that EQ to build a relationship with your reader, even while still being concise, what you can do is support your reader with visual and organizational guidance. You can keep your language very concise, but do other moves that are nice. For example, an email. Everybody loves an email with headings and bullets. We don't all want an email with long paragraphs all in a row. And so what if we wrote in a concise manner, but we added some guidance for our reader like headings? Now we're being nice in a different way. We're thinking, hey, reader, I know you're going to want some help finding things here, so I'm going to do that to be nice. We could also provide one sentence of context. We still want to be concise, but if we're saying to people, hey, you need to use this binder for opening and closing duties, how about one sentence of context, just one, before we open that up? Because what if somebody thinks, well, why am I supposed to be so worried about these duties? Maybe we could do a one-sentence context that says, in recent months, we've seen a few errors in closing duties which have led to these problems. And I've given that context for why is it that I'm bugging you again about the opening and closing duties. We could even say something like, in recent months, we've had a few attempted security breaches. That's why we're revisiting our opening and closing duties. So we're sharing information, we're being respectful and transparent, we're sharing the context, but only one sentence, and then we can still get to our main point, starting with who and what, about what we need to do about these new opening and closing procedures. Okay, and lastly, it might sound surprising at first, but one thing we want to do is purposefully sacrifice concision now and then, at the right times. So a way to kind of judge your draft, maybe you've written an email and you feel like, well, most of this is informational, but some of this is relational. I've written some of these sentences to connect with my reader. What I like to do is focus the content, make the content very, very concise. One sentence of information, here's my point, here's the deadline, here's what you need to do. But then I'll sacrifice concision before and after that. I'll say, oh, I hope you had a great weekend. I really enjoyed the rain. My garden's doing great. And then I get to the body and I'm very concise. And then I can go back to a relational closing. In a class the other day, we called it a positivity sandwich. Start positive, then get just direct and concise and positive. Or Sometimes I'll purposefully sacrifice concision if I know that it could be a difficult topic for someone, or that maybe one of my readers might be feeling badly about the topic or nervous. Let's go back to that example from the last step about adding in one sentence of context to help a reader even while we're being concise. Well, what if I did say, in recent months, we've experienced some security breaches. Please follow these opening and closing duties. I might then think to myself, shoot, what if that's making people nervous to talk about security breaches? And they might feel like I just breezed right through that. If you've written about a topic that might upset, worry, concern your audience, it's okay to slow down a little bit with the concision and talk about it. I might spend a little more time on that sentence on purpose because I know it's an emotional feeling for people to worry about breaches. Then I'll go back to being concise later. Other examples, I might write an entire concise email, but then get a little less concise when I'm talking about people on the team. Slow down a little and talk about relational information when I talk about people on the team. So remember, even as hard as we're all working to be concise, it's okay if 8 out of your 10 sentences are concise and 2 of your sentences are a little more wordy because you're doing a little more of the relationship building. Again, it's all about balance. Let me know how this goes for you. I'd love to hear some stories about what you do to be concise and nice. So let me know in the comments and I will get right back to you soon. Have a good day.